Okay, we can do the 3, 2, 1 countdown again just so for editing purposes. 3, 2, 1. Wait, actually, can you say it at the same time as me? Because I won't have your audio. Okay, ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go. Okay, take 2. Okay, welcome back to our channel. Today is another collaboration video, and this time I am collaborating with Evin and Darcie.
Hello.
I almost said welcome, but like this is your channel too, so.
That's true. Welcome to my channel.
Yeah, we're really excited for this video because what we're going to be talking about is something that's really important to both of us and something that has become more important as we get older and like realize the significance culturally, religiously, like spiritually and personally, the ways that it enriches our lives. So that being said, what we're talking about today is Sabbath. For those of you who may be watching this and not be like familiar with what Sabbath is, with the history of it, I'm just going to do a quick rundown. So I decided to shoot this part separately because I got a little bit lost in the weeds on my first take. Also, it's a little bit echoey in here, so hopefully the audio doesn't turn out too bad. So before I do give the description of what Sabbath is, just so you know what we're talking about, I did want to start with a little disclaimer. The following description and the video as a whole is being brought to you by a couple of Christians who grew up practicing the Sabbath in our religious tradition. And being from our perspective and our perspective only, it is inevitably going to be a bit of a limited perspective. We didn't do any research into this. We just are talking from our experience of growing up practicing this. It definitely bears saying that Sabbath is a long-standing tradition within Judaism, and neither of us are Jewish. So you will probably be able to find a lot more about its history and its meaning through sources from within that religion, that culture. So if you're interested in learning more about this concept and its history from a more knowledgeable source, we've left some resources down in the description for you to begin that research journey. Because this video is not at all intended to dive into theology or religious history, but instead to share our stories and the best way we know of to prioritize rest in a culture that is very, very busy. Okay, and now for the brief description. Essentially, Sabbath is a day of rest that God gave us, originating in the creation story, written in the Ten Commandments, and appearing in many other places in the Bible. And it is still practiced by various religious groups today. The practice of Sabbath is also growing in popularity in the secular world as a way to incorporate more rest into one's week and as a resistance against hustle culture. Evin and I grew up in a Christian denomination that practices Sabbath specifically on Saturday, like in Judaism. And in this video, we are going to talk about our experiences with it while growing up versus how we relate to it now as working adults, how our views have changed in some instances, and even how it has remained in our lives through deconstruction, how it has helped bring healing into certain mental issues such as anxiety and OCD, and how it ultimately helps center our lives around rest. So that gives you a good idea of what you can expect in this video. And let's get back to it.
So, as you know, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, so Sabbath has always been in my life, but honestly speaking, it's never something that I've understood on a personal level, I feel like. However, I have such good memories when I think about the Sabbath growing up. It was a time when we'd spend a lot of time out in nature. We had a lot of Sabbath rituals as a family, traditions. We'd go for Sabbath drives. We'd go for Sabbath walks. We'd watch Veggie Tales.
Yes, Veggie Tales.
Everybody knows. Play Bible board games, spend time with church friends, food, all of this type of stuff. But there was also a part of it that felt a little legalistic in ways, where it was okay, you can't do this, you can't watch this show, you can't listen to this music. So parts of it were quite enjoyable and other parts of it were like, oh, dang, like, can the sun go down now? Like, when is Sabbath gonna be over? Then I feel like when I got older and more like college aged, I didn't really keep the Sabbath much. I mean, I'd go to church with some friends, but it still just very much turned into scroll on social media, have whatever type of conversations you want to have. So it just turned into like a day off from schoolwork, but it wasn't necessarily restful in terms of how I spent it. Now it's very much shifting for me. As of maybe just 2 Sabbaths ago, actually, I'm now starting to understand what the Sabbath is really about, what Sabbath rest actually looks like, and not just in terms of a day, but what adopting Sabbath rest can look like throughout your entire week.
Yes.
And I'd say that has a lot to do with spiritual fast that I did, where I feel like God really revealed to me the implications that Sabbath rest can have in my own life, and especially in terms of dealing with chronic anxiety and OCD. So I feel like I have just gotten so much revelation there, and I feel so much growth there already. But maybe we can get into that a little later. I want to hear your perspective, like growing up, etc.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you to talk about your fast. My story with Sabbath kind of looks very similar to yours, which isn't surprising because we're both Seventh-day Adventists and like grew up Seventh-day Adventists. So there's going to be a lot of comparison there. But I wouldn't say my family was like super legalistic, but we were more on the strict side of Sabbath. For some reason, it's just become like this almost like stereotype of like really strict Adventists, like not being able, like swimming is a sin on Sabbath, which is very interesting to me.
But we can walk, we can hike, but we can't swim.
I say all that to say like my family was like not like that at all. But yes, there were things like we didn't like buy things on the Sabbath. We didn't like watch secular movies, listen to secular music on the Sabbath, things like that. So yeah, we watched our fair share of VeggieTales. We watched The Prince of Egypt on Sabbath and like went to church, of course.
So loud.
We would also like go to parks on the Sabbath, go on walks, enjoy nature. But there was still just like, I guess growing up, when you're a kid, you have to have a list of do's and don'ts because you're a kid. Like you have to have things explained to you in that way. And so Sabbath was definitely verging on that for me. And then of course going to church, like you have your very legalistic people. And so you kind of just get that like whole atmosphere of feeling like Sabbath is a restrictive day, and I definitely felt that. Like growing up, Sunday was my favorite day because it was a weekend, so I didn't have school, but I could also do whatever I wanted on Sunday. I enjoyed Sabbath. I enjoyed like the togetherness. Sometimes we would have people over to eat lunch. I liked going to church, not all the time, but sometimes I like going to church. But still, there was just that, like I said, overall atmosphere of like, I can't do everything I want to do. Going to college, that obviously gives you like a degree of freedom.
That was unintentional.
So I experienced changes in my Sabbath keeping when I went to college. And so a lot of my friends like would go out to eat on the Sabbath and like listen to secular music on the Sabbath. And so I eventually kind of started letting go of the things that I grew up with and would start doing those things, not necessarily because I didn't care about the Sabbath anymore, but just because I was trying to figure out what I personally believed about the Sabbath. And I started to question, like, why is it wrong to eat out on the Sabbath? Why is it wrong to listen? Is it wrong to listen to secular music on the Sabbath? Like, what are these things that I'm holding on to? And additionally, am I getting joy out of the Sabbath, or am I really hyper focused on these things that I can't do? So currently in my life right now, like I'm 2 years out of college, I've gone through a lot of spiritual growth, and I'm still kind of on my search to like really figure out what I still want to follow spiritually, why God is important to my life, why God is relevant to my life. And Sabbath is one of those core things where I'm really figuring out, why do I keep it? Why should I continue to keep it? So the one thing that has remained consistent for me has been doing no work on the Sabbath. That's one of the things that I like really cherish. Even when I was like questioning what I believe, do I even believe in God? Like I still kept to the whole no work on Sabbath. Like I do markets, I sell at markets, and there are so many markets on Sabbath. And
Oh, wow. Wait, well, yeah,
on,
that makes
on
sense.
Saturday. I guess I should say Saturday
Yeah.
so people also know we're talking about Saturday.
Yeah, true.
So many markets on Saturday, but I decided to not do those. Initially, it was kind of out of habit, and now it's also realizing that I actually really, really need that day that I'm not working. I need that. It's so good for me. Right now, I'm continuing to not work on the Sabbath, and I'm continuing to kind of loosely follow those rules that I grew up with, but more than focusing on those, I'm focusing on almost like reclaiming Sabbath for myself as a day of joy that I embrace, and not as a day of things that I can't do. So
correct.
I'm very excited about right now, like listening to podcasts about it, reading books about it, just trying to be more intentional about celebrating it.
That is good.
Yeah.
I agree with you there. I relate to what you said. You made a good point about there being, just a little bit of legalism that you're probably bound to feel as a child, because naturally you want to do a lot of things. You want to do what you want to do as a child, and to be told that you can't do something naturally will bring some frustration there. So that's a good point. I feel like that also just comes with maturity as well. But in terms of seeing the Sabbath as like a joy and like a celebration and something that you look forward to, absolutely relate there. Because now it's almost like sometimes I'm like, gee, Sabbath is over already. Like I need 5 more extra hours to just not have to think about anything else. I also relate to what you said about listening to secular music, about like wondering like, oh, is it wrong? Like, oh, why can't I? And now I understand that it's more so just more beneficial to only feed yourself things that are actually going to feed you spiritually on the Sabbath, because that's how you're going to experience the most rest, at least personally speaking. And I mean, listening to secular music, I do that all week. I don't necessarily feel like, I don't know, listening to secular music, watching secular entertainment doesn't necessarily like fill me up as, it's just, it's very passive. And so I feel like it wouldn't do much for me to listen to that stuff or to take in things like that on the Sabbath. I find it interesting that you said even when you were questioning God or going through that time that you said you still kept the Sabbath, or did you just not do any work because you wanted to rest? Like, which one?
Well, I kept the Sabbath. I went to church because I like the community aspect of Sabbath. So I would go to church with my fiance's family, though I didn't usually like pay attention or like really get much out of it.
Same.
But but I would also not work, and I would like listen to like religious music sometimes because that's what I grew up doing and that's nostalgic for me. Like, again, it's almost like it is a centering day. Like Sabbath is all about centering yourself. And even when I was questioning what I believed, I was still keeping Sabbath as a centering day. And also like, I wasn't sure I believed in God, but I also wasn't sure I didn't believe in God. So it was like, I was still practicing this with God in mind, even though I felt very shaky on that. So,
okay. I was curious to know, because when I went through my faith deconstruction, I definitely stopped keeping the Sabbath, because my thing was, coming from a spiritual point of view, a Christian point of view, me keeping the Sabbath was always tied to my respect for God and my reverence for God. And so while I was in that space where I didn't care for God at all, I was like, why am I going to keep your Sabbath if I don't even care about you?
Yeah.
So I intentionally stopped keeping it for a while. This was maybe in my senior year of college. I didn't do any schoolwork. Like, I kind of took the parts that
you liked.
I liked. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to do any homework. But everything else, I kind of threw it out of the like, what's the
out
word?
the window.
Yeah, threw it out the window.
Yeah. When you just like stopped keeping the Sabbath, like, did you notice any effects in your life? Like energy levels, mindset, etc.?
Well, okay, first, I think it's important to say that naturally I felt more restless every single day, because when I was detached from God, that's when I really did come to the understanding that God is the source of my energy. Like, so when I was detached from him, I just naturally felt more restless. I felt more agitated. I felt more negative. And so if you just consider that broader picture, yes, not keeping the Sabbath, I felt similarly.
Right.
It felt like I was just drained. Like, my energy overall was more drained. Didn't have as much clarity of mind. Like I said, I was more pessimistic. And that's when I realized, okay, I understand the importance of having a day off apart from any spiritual implications. I just understand giving your body time to rest, because even the animals in nature, they have cycles of work rest. I think during that time I definitely came to understand the practical side of it, and also understanding that God is a very practical God, and it's not just all this spiritual foo-foo. Like,
absolutely, that's a big thing that I'm really focusing on right now, because I'm still going through a time of where I really am like nailing down what I believe in. Like, I'm at a point where I'm just exploring the practicality of God and realizing that so much, literally everything like that is like advice or along those lines in the Bible, it's for us to thrive. Like,
it is.
There's a lot of things that have been misinterpreted or like read like cherry picked, and so they miss their original context and things like that. So there are certain parts of the Bible that I think people would be like, really, like, is this what we're supposed to do today? But when you read the Bible as a whole story, you see that it is truly, it's how we were meant to function as humans, because like God created us. Anyways, that's another tangent. So
but I love that. No, but I love that tangent, because I think when you understanding that changes the game, because then you realize it really does switch the legalistic view to the, oh, like, this is actually for my benefit. Like, this, not doing this will be to my own peril. Like, you know, and that's something that John Mark Comer said in his series on Sabbath. He said that to argue whether or not you need to keep the Sabbath, it's kind of like arguing whether or not you need to keep the law of gravity. He's like, it just is.
That's so
he
good.
said it just is. He said not doing it will be to your own peril. And that just stuck out to me, because I'm like, yeah, like, there is this ongoing debate in the Christian world, especially, where it's like, oh, well, you know, keeping the Sabbath was abolished on the cross, it's not necessary anymore. But I feel like if all of us would come to the understanding that to not intentionally have that day of rest, it's not gonna help you. It doesn't help you in any way. Like, it's like, if anything, I feel like if we all fully understood the benefits of it and the purpose behind it, everybody would want to, like, oh my gosh, thank you, I actually have an excuse to not do anything like this. It's, you know, so it's I really agree with him where he says that arguing whether or not you have to, it's a waste of breath. It's almost a waste of time. So I want to just further explain what the spiritual fast that I did was like, and what I learned a little bit in a super succinct version of that. But basically, I went into the fast primarily seeking peace and clarity, specifically in the areas of just having general anxiety and seeking freedom from chronic OCD. I've always felt, up until that point, again, this was just like 2 Saturdays ago, but I'd always felt that God, he could heal me from anxiety and OCD, but I didn't necessarily think he would. My whole thing was that, you know, everybody has something in life that they struggle with, whether it's an addiction or it's some mental health disorder or physical pain or whatever. Everybody has something, and this is just my thing. And, you know, some people just have to live with it forever, and God helps you to cope. He gives you the tools. And so I just kind of took that on as my reality forever. I didn't realize that I had deliberately done this until speaking to my boyfriend and my mummy. And they were like, why are you trying to think for God? Like, do you not think he wants you to have peace? Like, do you not think he wants to heal you from this thing that's causing you everyday distress? And I was like, I mean, I just think it just comes with the territory of living, basically. But when I dug a little deeper, I realized at the root of it was that I was afraid if I had asked God to heal me totally from this thing, that if he didn't do it, I would just be more disheartened, and that it would, I don't know, I think I just felt like it would sting deeper if I had asked for it and he hadn't delivered. So I felt safer asking him for something that I knew he would do, which is provide me with the tools, provide me with a good therapist, you know, kind of just meet me there so I don't have to expect you to do the impossible, you know? And so when I went into the fast, now understanding the limitations I'd put on God, I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask you with full faith to heal me, like to heal me from this chronic issue, because I'm now believing that nothing is too big for you to do. What I had not realized and what I had not known before going into it was that the healing that he would give me and that he did give me was so closely tied to keeping the Sabbath. And he led me to Isaiah 58, and in that verse it talks about near the end, like, if you keep the Sabbath, you stay away from speaking idly or whatever, then you will experience like healing, etc. And so in a nutshell, it wasn't like God just said, oh, like, you're healed. No, it was like, here is how you're going to maintain the healing that I'm giving you. And it's found in fully observing the Sabbath day, fully understanding what rest truly means and how you can carry that into your everyday life, because that's how you're going to experience long-lasting freedom from this chronic anxiety and OCD that you have. And I was like, okay. And so I was just like, okay, well, what does that look like then? Like, what, like, I have a better idea of what keeping the Sabbath is like based on upbringing, but what in the world does Sabbath rest during the week look like? So for me, because I do think God is a very personal God and he speaks to people very differently, I now realize that it looks like, and I hope you understand what I mean by this, but listening, trusting my intuition as opposed to making decisions based on how much anxiety I feel. And because I feel like in everyday life, whether it's like little decisions I have to make or bigger decisions, I've typically made decisions, yes, based on my gut instinct, but more so just weighing options and being like, okay, do I feel super anxious with this decision? Or is my anxiety a little less with this decision? And I realized that that's not necessarily healthy for me. And so I feel like what God was telling me during that fast is that a part of you resting during the week looks like you trusting that I am guiding your intuition and that the Holy Spirit is speaking to you through your intuition. And that's where you're going to experience the most peace. That super still, like almost like inner knowing, like when you kind of just know something feels right or know something is right, like trusting that with whatever decisions you have to make, small or big, and him revealing to me that is where you will find me, in that still peace. You're not gonna, like, I'm not gonna come at you in this super high anxiety space where you're trying to find me. And he was like, so that's what that's gonna look like for you, resting every day in your week. Whatever decisions you're making, trust that's still intuition, and experience what that peace, what that rest feels like. Now I understand again just how important like observing the Sabbath and keeping the Sabbath will be just for my mental state, my overall well-being, maintaining this healing. I have a better understanding of resting during the week and not living from a space of angst 24/7. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's so beautiful. I almost teared up during that. That's amazing. I love that you said practicing the Sabbath is a practical way of bringing the practice of rest into your life. And rest is so much more like all consuming than just like sleeping or like physically resting.
Yeah.
Resting is giving your brain a break. Resting is trusting yourself to make a decision and not be like paralyzed by the amount of options that are before you. When you're talking about that specifically, I thought about a podcast. So this podcast was talking about decision anxiety, and one of the things it brought up was the fact that so many more people have anxiety today because we have so many options and so many, like, not even just things we can buy, but things we can be, like so many options. And so he used the example of like jeans. You go to a store and there's like 100 pairs of jeans to choose. Like, maybe that's a little bit much, but there's an insane amount of jeans you can choose from. And whereas like back in the day, you would only have like one option. So you would buy that pair of jeans and you would be happy with it because you just had one option. You got what it was. And if it doesn't fit perfectly, you're still happy with it for what it is.
Yeah.
But nowadays, if you get a pair of jeans and you're not 100% happy with it, you're going to feel like you're at fault for making the wrong decision. You're going to regret that decision. You're going to be like, I should have tried another pair of jeans. I should have like tried all my options. And so that's just a small little snippet of, I think, what all of us go through, like almost on the day to day of just living in this world where there's so many options of things to buy. There's so many options of things to do. You're watching people on social media, like live their lives and do all these different things. And like, that is very anxiety producing.
Yes, it is.
I'm going on a fast right now as well, partially inspired by Evin going on her fast. And what I'm doing is fasting from social media. I'm still allowing myself to post, but I'm not consuming social media. And that's like the whole point of this fast. I don't want to I don't want to be on my phone in the morning for like an hour watching what other people are doing in their lives while I'm in bed looking like trash. Like, I want to enjoy the moment for what it is. And so this is me practicing rest in a more extreme way by not getting on social media any day. But even after this fast, like, I would really like to continue having at least one day of the week. And I think Saturday will be a really good day to do it, where I don't get on social media at all. And I just rest with what I am now and what I have now. And that was a point in again, the John Mark Comer podcast that really stuck out to me, where he said, he was talking about the concept of why certain people don't believe it's right to buy things on the Sabbath. And the Bible says this, like the Bible says no buying or selling on the Sabbath. Yeah. And so that's something that I've been wondering too, like, why is this a rule for the Sabbath? But what he explained is that Sabbath is about being grateful for what you have. Yeah. And it's not about like following the letter of the law and not buying or selling anything, but it's about focusing on the here and now, focusing on what you have. And that's why I feel like social media kind of falls in that area of buying and selling, because when you're looking at other people's lives, you're like seeing all these things you don't have. Social media is like concentrated.
It's just all like hyper consumerism. It's just, you're just consuming. So I relate with you there too. That's also a new practice of mine that I've done on and off throughout the years, but I'm seriously going to do now because the benefit, the mental break.
You said like hyper consumerism, like this culture that we're surrounded in. Yeah. And that goes to another thing I wanted to mention about the fact that Sabbath is literally like countercultural, because it's a resistance against hustle culture, because you're intentionally resting, you're intentionally distancing yourself from business, from social media, from like the hustle of just everything.
Grind it out.
So it's literally an act of resistance. There are so many benefits, and there's like physical, there's mental, there's spiritual, obviously, and then there's also, this probably fits into one of those categories, but community and connection. Sabbath is a day to focus on strengthening relationships, not only your spiritual relationships, but also your significant other and your family and your friends. So it's a beautiful day for connection. So that's one of the benefits of
that's so true. And like I said, that was always my most favorite part of keeping the Sabbath when I was younger and in my teenage years. I'd say another benefit is definitely the mental reset. When you have practices like not being on social media, not doing any homework or work that you do throughout the week or anything like that, just naturally it's like you get a weekly reset, like you get back to baseline to be like, okay, I'm going in with fresh energy for this week, fresh ideas. And I think that that's probably at the top of the list for me in terms of benefits, especially if you are someone who will naturally overthink or naturally be more anxious towards certain things. I feel like on Sabbath, disciplining yourself and your brain to not think about any of those things and to not plan in your head, because I've also realized that too. I'm like, I used to think, well, I'm not planning in my weekly planner, so technically I'm resting. But no, I would find myself almost involuntarily like ruminating on what I'm gonna do throughout the week while I'm laying there with my eyes closed in the hammock. I'm like, so it's not like a flip of the switch, the sun is set, I'm in Sabbath. No, it definitely takes practice, but I think it's worth it because, like I said, the mental clarity. I feel like on Sundays, I feel like well rested overall, not just the sleep, but definitely like, okay, I have more vision for the week.
Yeah. Yes. So, and then obviously there's the physical benefit of just like physically resting. Like a lot of people take naps on Sabbath. Wonderful thing to do.
As you should.
So yeah, like physical, mental, community. And then there's also the spiritual benefit in my spiritual journey of figuring out what I believe and figuring out why I believe the things I do and why I do the things that I do. I'm also learning that humans were made for spirituality. Like we all have a spiritual need. And I mean, there's a lot of different religions. There's a lot of different spiritual practice. There's a lot of people filling that in different ways. But I think all of that just goes to show we kind of all have this desire for something spiritual in our lives to like ground us. And one of the parts of a spiritual practice is a ritual. And I don't mean that in like I don't mean like weird rituals. Not gonna go down that road. I don't want to offend anybody either, but but like rituals, like again, like Sabbath,
Like spiritual disciplines.
Yeah, things that you practice to ground yourself spiritually. And I think of Sabbath as a ritual because it's something that it grounds you in so many ways. It grounds you physically, mentally, and it grounds you spiritually. It kind of like centers you again, like we were talking about earlier in the video. It brings you back to like this place of peace that exists beyond the mental and physical spheres.
Yeah.
It's a very soul-filling type of rest. And like, it's not like you're going to keep a Sabbath and then just be a completely new person. Like, it's a practice.
Yeah. It is a practice.
Initially, it might just be a nice day off. Like, if you haven't practiced a Sabbath in your life before, it might just initially be like, you need this day off. And so you're starting there. Something that John Mark said in his podcast, even starting small, like giving yourself an hour or like 3 hours in a day as a Sabbath, a type of Sabbath, is a good place to start. Moving up to a full day is ideal. And he was saying, choose a day in the week, like whatever day works best for you. I will say Evin and I do believe that Saturday is the best day to do this. Not even just for spiritual reasons. I mean, obviously there's spiritual, like we both believe in God and we both believe that God told us to rest on Saturday. But just when you look at like our rhythms as human beings, like we go through a rhythm of 7 days in a week. And so Saturday is the last day of that week. So it kind of makes sense that once you've finished your week, you need a rest before you begin the next week. So we recommend Saturday as the day. Yes. But we also want to, like, at least I just want to encourage you to start incorporating rest into your life because it's so important, and like full rest, not just laying on the couch and watching a TV show or something.
I agree with that. And that's the thing. Like, I'd say, like, most of the people in my life who are close to me are people who go to church on Sundays. They also would agree that it's like they don't feel an incentive to keep Sunday because they also don't necessarily recognize it as Sabbath. They would just be like, oh yeah, I go to church on Sunday, the Lord's Day. But they would also recognize that after they go to church, they're going to go to the baseball game, they're going to watch TV, they're going to catch up on homework. So like the friends of my life who go to church on Sunday, they'd be like, yeah, I don't really observe a Sabbath at all. I just go to church and that's it. So, and like you said, the same can be said about people like Seventh-day Adventists, people who keep Saturday as well. Some people don't. Sometimes it's just you go to church, you come home, you sleep, and then you plan what you're going to do Saturday night.
Yes. With your friends. So true. The moment the sun goes down, you're like, all right, back to work.
That was a rule for us growing up. My siblings and I weren't allowed to get ready to go out on whatever we were going to do Saturday night. We had to give enough room. Like, if the sun set at 7:30, we couldn't start getting ready at like 6:30 or 7. I guess you could either see that as legalistic, or you can kind of see it as respecting what it is and also giving yourself that full time to like rest before jumping right into it so quickly. Oh my gosh, my battery's dying.
Oh no. Okay. To wrap this up, so first of all, I just want to say, I know a lot of people will have a hesitation of like taking a full day because they're like, I don't have time for that. Like, how can I fit that in? I just wanted to say, typically I found that you have time for what you want to have time for. And I know it may not feel like you have time for it. I totally get that because there's other aspects of my life that like I feel that as well. But I do want to just say from my experience, I've never worked on Saturday. My family has never worked on Saturday. Most people in my denomination don't work on Saturday, and we still get all our work done. We still do what we need to do, and we're like better for it. So I just want to encourage you in that if you're like thinking of like trying this out, but you're a little bit scared about not being able to get work done. And again, like if you need to start small, start small.
Yeah, I agree. We have the same 24 hours as everybody else does, the same amount of time in the week. Like you said, most of my friends are non-Sabbath keepers. I have the same responsibilities. It always gets done. Always gets done. Yeah, so you got it. Just start small, like Darcie said.
Before her camera dies, one more thing. We wanted to just like share some things that you can do to like research into this a little bit more for yourself if you're interested in this topic of Sabbath and also the topic of rest. We've been mentioning the John Mark Comer podcast this whole time. All of these things will be in the description, so I'm not going to necessarily say them all now, but we have some Christian resources down there, and also I'm putting the naaaah ministry. That's a secular rest ministry. They're doing some interesting work. It's run by Trisha Hersey, who's a Black woman, and she says that she sees rest as a form of resistance and reparations. So it's like a really interesting angle to come at
That's
rest
cool.
from. She takes Sabbaths herself. Whatever resources that we kind of found in like preparing for this video, and not even just preparing, just like enriching our own lives, we're going to share those down in the description for you if you would like to do some more research into that. I think that's about it.
But that's all before this.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Evan, this was so great. I'm so glad we got to talk about this.
This went even better than I thought it would.
This
It was so natural, so easy to talk
fantastic.
about.
I feel like we can even do more videos on this topic.
Same.
Too. Especially as we go about our own journeys through Sabbath. Like, updates coming soon.
Yes.
Cool.
All right.
Alrighty. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Cool.
Beautiful. Right on the cusp.
Man, that's great.
Ending audio.